Welcome to the Synergy podcast, the space where we redefine how we move, heal, and experience our bodies. My name is Arianna Montanari, yoga teacher, beekeeper, and soap maker, founder of Mielistega Natural Body Products. Sustainability in all forms is the thread that I have been following over the past 20 years. Here we break free from the unspoken rules that tell us how we should move and feel. Here we long for deeper connection with nature, with ourselves, and through intuitive movement, self-care, and self-awareness, we explore what it truly means to work with the body instead of pushing against it. So, whether you're a yogi, a seeker, or simply curious about stepping into a more liberated way of living, you're in the right place. So let's dive in. As usual, before I record an episode, I take a few weeks to brainstorm, to write down the thoughts, and to gather all the thoughts, all the things happening in my life, and making them into one episode, weaving them into each other. In these weeks, this past, 8 weeks, has been sustainability, climate change, beekeeping, but also fossil fuels, yoga, holidays, wildfire, anger, kindness, inner goals, politics. And these things might seem unrelated, but they are all part of the same system. Every time I come back to Italy, I notice how relatively good the situation is in Sweden. So Southern Europe, you might have heard, is going through massive heat waves, huge wildfires, water scarcity, and high energy prices. Every time I come back to Italy, I feel anxious. I worry. But let me tell you, my intention with this episode is not to share pessimism or anxiety, but to give you a key to understand what we call sustainability and climate change, and what we can do on the inside as individuals. So let us start by acknowledging the fact that sustainability is so broad, and I really understand why many people feel overwhelmed and have no idea where to start. And the reason is perhaps because sustainability isn't just one clear problem. It is a web of problems, behaviors, systems, habits, economies, politics, relationships, and beliefs. And I believe that we don't even understand it all. Even the best specialist does not understand it all. So instead of trying to solve the whole sustainability issue today, I would like to explore something much more manageable. How do we become people who are capable of creating a more sustainable world? Not easy, but more manageable, something we actually know we have control over. What actually is sustainability? Let's go into more of a technicism. The UN's Brundtland definition is the classic 1987 definition, which is meeting present needs without compromising future generations' ability to meet theirs. For me, sustainability is not just about the future. I believe that when we constantly talk about the future, goals for 2030, 2050, about leaving a better world for our children, grandchildren, we somehow lose momentum. We shift the focus to a moment that is the future and lose sight of the present. I'm more than happy to leave a beautiful world to the future generations, but we need to create a world that is already livable now, today, for myself, for you. We need clean water, healthy ecosystems, shade in the cities. I see news about these every day. food systems that don't destroy the soil, communities where people are not exhausted, access to education, people who can afford to live, afford to have air conditioning when it is so warm, or children who can actually play outside and the air doesn't make us sick. Institutions, they make plans, as I said, for 2030, 2050. Decades pass by, we are far from where we should be. What we thought would only be worst case scenarios, if you have been following the debate, are now daily news. And yet, we live our lives. We go on holiday, me first. We go to work, we fly, we use our cars, we buy more than we need sometimes. Sustainability is asking whether the way we organize human life can continue without destroying the conditions that make life possible. So it's like a step deeper. I have witnessed change, and probably so did you. I have just spent 2 weeks on holiday on a gorgeous island in the Mediterranean that I like to call one of my homes. And I have seen how climate change is affecting the Mediterranean Sea. I have seen the water become warmer and at times yellowish instead of the turquoise, transparent water it used to be. New currents bring thousands of these tiny pieces of plastic, also bigger ones, onto those beautiful beaches. And people just bathe in it. Go in and out, and they just bathe in it. Just avoiding the pieces floating around them, or the rubbish on the beach that people have dropped or that the sea has vomited onto the coastline during winter. I remember a few weeks ago when I was there, somebody said while we were having a dip in the sea, I heard that this beach was supposed to be beautiful, like that this island is so beautiful, but this water is so disgusting. And I'm like, yeah, but we need to see the big picture here. So I have been going to this island since I was born, okay? So I have seen and experienced the change. And because I have lived at that place, I also respect it. And another example, when I was little, we didn't need air conditioning. At night in the summer, the temperature indoors, maybe 28 degrees, totally fine. It was warm, but with a fan, all good. Up until 3 or 4 years ago, when I remember it reaching 34 degrees here in Venice. And you understand, you cannot sleep. It is difficult to live. And so air conditioning becomes a must. And this is where climate change becomes a complicated issue, because the same thing that contributes to the problem can also become a response to the problem. I need air conditioning because it is too hot to sleep, but air conditioning requires energy, creates heat. How do you make the right choice when the system itself is so incredibly full of contradictions? Climate change becomes, though, tangible when you have known the same place your entire life. You can see the bigger picture. I mentioned people having a dip in the sea, swimming through plastic. And the term for this is cognitive dissonance, which is the discomfort created when our beliefs and our behaviors do not match. So let me make an example. I know that climate change is real, it's happening. I am worried about the future, and tomorrow I still get on a plane. And that does not necessarily make someone hypocritical. It makes them human inside a system that often gives us a very few simple choices when the reality is way more complicated. And we have to be careful not to turn sustainability into a perfection contest, right? Because then someone says, you fly, therefore you don't care, or you eat meat, therefore you're part of the problem, or you drive, and then, the conversation ends. And something I want to share with you. And if you have been following me on Instagram, you might have heard the story. But when I was in Tuscany, I was at the beach and I saw that a child was having a birthday party at the beach, hanging balloons from all the sun umbrellas. So, balloons at the beach is a scenario that for me can only go wrong. So, there's a lot of margin for that. So anyway, at the end of the party, the birthday boy was super nice and went around the beach and distributed all the leftover balloons to other children. A girl was playing with one of them when it burst. All right, so the birthday boy, again, super kind, went back to her and gave her another one. So the grandpa, 60, 70 years old, just to give you some context, took the pieces of the broken balloon, dropped them on the sand, and covered them up with sand with his foot. And all of this as if it was nothing. And I got so upset. And this is just a tiny example of how we are facing today's enormous challenge and perhaps how we arrived where we are today. I call it the whatever approach. It is covering the pieces of balloon with a little bit of sand. Whatever, it's nothing. It's like shrugging our shoulders, thinking that our actions do not make any difference. And I'm sure that, at least I hope that nobody wakes up thinking, ooh, today I am going to contribute to environmental degradation, although, well, maybe some actually do if you know what I mean. But for most of us, it happens through hundreds of tiny moments of, it is just one balloon. It is just one plastic bottle. It is just one flight. It's nothing. Or someone else will clean it. What difference does it make? It's not my responsibility. And collectively, you understand that those tiny moments become enormous. The opposite of this whatever is not necessarily perfection. All right, I must do everything perfectly. It is simply I notice, I observe. And that brings me to two questions. Why don't we respond? And why do we know so much about what's going on and still struggle to act or to accept the reality? And one of the things I have learned through yoga is that awareness changes things. We often think of yoga as movement, as flexibility, breathing, maybe meditation, but underneath all of that is something much simpler, which is learning to notice. That is like the base. Notice what's happening in the body, the breath, notice the tension, the thoughts, the habits. Notice how we react to things, to people, to behaviors. And I think that this capacity of noticing is incredibly relevant to sustainability because you cannot change what you don't notice. You can't question a habit you don't see. You can't care for a place you don't know. And you cannot take responsibility for something you have completely disconnected yourself from. So that grandfather, that man at the beach, didn't necessarily, I hope, make a conscious decision to pollute the beach. Perhaps he simply didn't register the pieces of balloon as something that mattered. And that to me is one of the biggest challenges that we face. We have become very good at not noticing, at ignoring. It is also true that we have been exposed to so much information, right? Every day. So much crisis, many enormous problems that many of us have become numb. At some point, the nervous system simply can't stay activated by everything all the time. It is a coping mechanism. Information overload can produce this freeze response, this paralysis. So imagine, I hear every day, oceans are dying, forests are disappearing, temperatures are rising, biodiversity is declining. Governments aren't acting quickly enough. or corporations are polluting. So what exactly am I supposed to do while standing in my kitchen eating a banana from Ecuador? Like how do you approach such huge problems with one tangible, concrete action? It gets overwhelming. Like the scale of the problem can feel completely ridiculous compared to what one can do. But it is also true that the scale of the problem cannot become an excuse for abandoning our sphere of influence. Individual action is not enough, but individual action is not meaningless. So we need individual action, but we also need the collective one. We need institutional will. We need political action, technological change, and cultural change, perception change. We need all of it. And so while standing in your kitchen and eating your banana from Ecuador, you're thinking, so what does matter? Shall I recycle? Shall I eat plant-based? Shall I stop driving a car or take short showers? Only buy secondhand? The options are, I would say, almost endless. And there is no right answer to this. There is each individual's journey, capacity, and circumstances. And take myself as an example, all right? I started with recycling and saving water when I was little. I have to admit that my brothers thought I was so annoying because maybe I would go and knock on the bathroom door after maybe half an hour shower. I'm like, hey, you need to save water. Imagine having such an annoying little sister. Over the years, I have learned more and adjusted. I am now vegetarian. I rarely buy clothes or things like that in online shops or in real shops for the matter. I try to boycott big multinationals. I choose local small businesses like myself. I started beekeeping. I use natural body products and very few cleaning products at home and as little plastic as possible at home. So I do what I can where I can. There are areas, though, where I do leave a footprint. On flights, for example, I do live abroad, so away from my family, and I fly relatively often to visit my family and to get some sun in the winter. But I choose to make my stays long. I drive an old car. I do bike as much as I can all year round. Yet doing markets and being a beekeeper requires a car, in my case. Winters are tough in Sweden, and having a car really helps with logistics and, to be honest, gives me more freedom of movement that makes me feel less lonely. Because I live in Sweden, locally grown or organic food is not always available and accessible or affordable. So my point here is that we cannot do it all right. Perfection in this area is impossible because we have built a system around endless consumption, global supply chains, and constant economic growth. We need to start from the small things we feel we have capacity for, those things we see, and remind ourselves that it's a learning experience. And the more you see, the more you learn, the more you adjust and you adapt. And this is also something that yoga has taught me. There is no perfect practice. Some days I'm strong, some days I am tired. Some days I have 1 hour, some days I have 10 minutes. And the practice is not ruined because I couldn't do it perfect. I return, I adapt, I learn, I go on. And sustainability at a personal level, how we approach it needs the same mindset. So I don't need to live a perfectly sustainable life tomorrow. I need to become a little more aware and conscious of how I live today. You can continually ask yourself, what do I know now that I didn't know 5 years ago? What can I change now that I couldn't change 5 years ago? So also like see the transformation over time. And this is essentially svadhyaya, self-study in the yoga world. We observe ourselves, so we notice our patterns, so we learn, we become aware of the consequences. And once we see something clearly, it becomes much harder to unknow it. Experiencing climate change in Italy also makes me think about these individual circumstances and social justice, because sustainability discourse can become deeply privileged if we ignore capacity. So, someone with money or access to public transport, local food, somebody with time, education, flexible work, safe housing has very different choices from someone who doesn't. We need to distinguish between the choice, access, and capacity. And I think that this matters because sustainability should not become another way of measuring how good or bad people are, or only people with a certain wealth can access better life conditions. So, what does yoga have to do with sustainability? You might wonder. So, we went already into this a little bit, but if sustainability is partly about changing the way we live in the world, then we also have to ask what kind of human being is capable of making those changes? What skills do we need? And perhaps the first capacity yoga develops is awareness. We spoke about this already, right? Yoga develops awareness, helps us noticing sensations, emotions, impulses, habits, posture, reactions, relationships. If I don't notice that I am uncomfortable, I might reach for something to consume to make myself feel better. If I don't notice that I'm anxious, I might keep scrolling. If I don't notice my patterns, I cannot change them. And yoga develops the ability to pause. We live in a culture designed around immediate response, reaction. I see, I want, I click, I buy. I feel uncomfortable, I get distracted. See difficult news, I scroll. I feel overwhelmed, I shut down. And so yoga gives us a gap. I feel something, I notice. I don't have to immediately act on it. And that gap is enormous. That pause is where choice becomes possible. It's one of the most sustainable things we can practice is this ability to pause before we consume, we react, we buy, we judge, or we discard. Yoga teaches us to stay with discomfort. Let us be honest, sustainability is uncomfortable. Climate change is uncomfortable. Inequality is uncomfortable. Thinking about our own consumption is uncomfortable. And our natural tendency is to escape discomfort, to avoid it. While yoga gives us practice, staying present with other sensations, without immediately running away from it. When your legs are shaking into going into a yoga pose, you learn something that discomfort does not automatically mean stop. Sometimes you can just soften up a little bit or breathe or stay or adjust. So the practice is learning the difference. And I think that we need this skill collectively, because if every uncomfortable piece of information makes us shut down, we become incapable of responding to the world around us. Then we're just in the freeze mode the whole time, and then nothing changes. Yoga also teaches interconnection. Ahimsa is often translated as non-violence or non-harming. And as you know, my teacher taught me also to understand it through compassion or kindness. I have spoken about this in previous episodes. I think it was one of the first ones, actually. So if we take the ahimsa principle seriously, the question becomes much bigger than how I behave toward another human being. It becomes, how do my choices affect other beings? Like the food I eat, the things I buy, the chemicals I put down the drain, the land I use, the way I treat animals, the resources I consume, the waste I create. And for instance, beekeeping has changed my understanding of interconnection. You suddenly realize that the tiny things happening around you or in the hive are not tiny at all, are not isolated at all. Flowers, weather, pesticide, soil, water, rain, temperature, agriculture, bees, humans, we're all part of one system. We function according to the same rules, same principles. This is system thinking through lived experience, and it's not just theory, right? You learn to see the whole system. So if we have all the knowledge and we have some technology and we have the reports, we have the data, the gap between knowing and doing remains enormous. We are talking about sustainability as an inner practice, and this is why I organize every year in October a synergy retreat in Tuscany. It is called Root and Flow, 5 days in this beautiful place called La Gualdavecchia in the hills in Tuscany. But we'll be taking care of ourselves, slow down, have a creative workshop, movement, synergy every day, every morning, every afternoon, learning how it feels to notice, to slow down, to care, to smell. And rather than always rushing, we prioritize for 5 days actually tuning into yourself. Allow all the noise from the outside to get silent. We shut it off. And instead, we tune into our inner desires, our inner voice. That sometimes is difficult to hear because of all the noise around us. 1st to 5th of October 2026. So there are only 6 spots. And if you are interested, you just send me a message on Instagram, or you can find me on mielestrega, or you send me an email at mielestrega@gmail.com. Back to our conversation. When I discovered the inner development goals at the outdoor gym a few years ago, I immediately recognized many of these capacities of yoga. And I don't know if you have heard of these inner development goals. So they're actually created in Sweden. So it's not a yoga framework, all right? But they ask similar questions like, what capacities do human beings need in order to live and act differently? It's not just about creating goals for sustainable agriculture, but we need to see what type of humans, what type of skills. And as yoga teacher, I have spent years teaching people to slow down, to notice, to feel, to understand, and to respond rather than react. Sustainability requires exactly this movement. Our culture operates often stimulus, desire, right? Now we go consumption, disposal, distraction, repeat, right? And we keep consuming. And yoga, at its best, interrupts that loops or slows us down. It creates a pause between impulse and action, and that is not only useful for our nervous system, it is relevant to how we consume, how we relate to other people, how we respond to difficult information, and how we participate in. The man threw at the beach is not just a balloon, but it connects to the production of the balloon, the consumption, petroleum, right, fossil fuels, the manufacturing, the marketing, the waste that affects the ecosystem, and then the human behavior. So likewise, my flight isn't just my flight. It exists inside an entire infrastructure. And this doesn't mean that nothing matters. It means that we need to learn to see the connections. the bigger picture. And in this case, yoga supports us with observation, reflection, curiosity, and the ability to question all these automatic assumptions that we make. Third area is relating. This is empathy. Can I care about people who don't live like me? Can I care about someone who doesn't agree with me? Can I care about future generations or about a forest I have never visited? Can I expand my circle of concern? You cannot create a sustainable world through contempt for the people who haven't arrived at the same conclusions as you. And in this area, the similarities with yoga is that compassion, that empathy, the non-harming or the connection. Fourth area of the inner development goals is this collaborating. And yoga reminds us that we are not separate bodies practicing in separate little bubbles. So we exist in relationship to everything. This is where individual sustainability ends. I can recycle my rubbish alone, but I cannot redesign an entire food system alone. Now, we need communities, businesses, scientists, politicians, educators, farmers, activists, consumers. And so let me tell you about my master thesis when I spent time in Madagascar and worked with a WWF school. That was back in 2015. So I compared school working with Education for Sustainable Development, this WWF school, with a village school that wasn't. I asked the children whose responsibility it was to deal with the rubbish problem in the village, and the children from the WWF school said, it's ours. And they suggested that they place some bins out in the village so that people could actually throw the rubbish in them. While the children from the, say, communal village school, they answered that it was the elders' responsibility. It was the WWF responsibility to take care of all the rubbish. So that difference fascinated me because the problem was exactly the same. But there was a gap between seeing a problem and seeing yourself as someone capable of responding to it. That's agency. That's taking responsibility and taking action. And it's so powerful. The fifth and last area of action from the inner development goals is acting, action. This is where everything becomes real. So how do I connect I care to what am I going to do? And yoga supports us with asking, how do I bring what I understand into how I actually live? Satya is truthfulness. So what happens if I apply Satya to sustainability? Can I honestly look at my consumption? Can I acknowledge where I am contributing to a problem without turning that awareness into shame? Can I be honest about what I can change and what I cannot? Can I stop pretending that my individual actions will solve everything? But can I also stop pretending that my actions don't matter? And for this, I have created 5 actions that will help you in your journey. And they might not be what you expect. So 5 practical actions. First one, notice. Start observing your local ecosystem, whether you live in the city or whether you live in the countryside. Notice trees. What trees are they? If there is water around you, the birds, the insects, they always find their way. The flowers, the soil, the shade, the heat. You cannot protect what is invisible to you. For instance, beekeeping, again as an example, changed the way that I see the world because suddenly all the tiniest details became visible to me. Flowers became food for the bees, not just decorations or weeds that you need to remove. And suddenly the entire landscape became a part of the system I was participating in. 2, Follow your money. And it's not just saying like consume wisely. Ask yourself, where does my money go? Every purchase you make is a participation in an economic system. So ask yourself, who made this? Where? Under what condition? How long will it last? Could I repay it? Could I repair it? Could I buy it locally? Do I need it? Your bank account is also a voting system, not literally, of course, but metaphorically. So every time we spend money, we support something. There's a lot of questions going on today. Hope you have pen and paper and you're writing them down. Number 3, learn to live with limits. This is one of my favorite ones. And I am not suggesting you deprive yourself of all pleasures, all right? But we have created a culture based on more. More products, more convenience, more travel, more speed, more choice, more growth. But many of the resources and ecological systems we depend on are finite or have limits to how quickly they can regenerate. So sustainability asks, can we rediscover the difference between enough and more? And this connects beautifully back to yoga, because aparigraha, often translated as this non-hoarding or non-grasping, invites us to investigate what is enough, investigate the excess. And there is a beautiful Swedish word for this that is lagom. So it's not deprivation, it's not having nothing, but enough, that right balance. So what happens when we ask ourselves, so why we want something? Do I need it? Do I enjoy it? Am I replacing something? Am I bored? Am I anxious? Am I trying to become somebody through what I buy? Am I being manipulated into believing that having this thing will make my life better? Today, we're throwing out there a lot of existential questions. But we do live in an economy that needs us to keep wanting more. The whole economy is based on it. And yoga gives us the opportunity to investigate that wanting, to kind of question it, to pause a little bit. Number 4, don't just reduce, regenerate. So during COVID, I studied permaculture, the art of regeneration, a way of treating the land and our soil in a way that works with natural systems rather than against them. In healthy natural systems, what looks like waste in one process becomes resource for another. So everything is connected in cycle. And if you have been listening to this podcast for a while, you might recognize something here from the way I teach movement. Working with the body rather than against it. So at this point, we need to go further than how can I have less impact? Because it is not enough at the point where we are at. We need to think not only about reducing harm, but about restoring and regenerating. So ask instead, how can I leave something better than I found it? Plant something. Support biodiversity. If you lack the knowledge, learn, ask somebody. Buy from a local producer, feed pollinators, repair something. Teach a child, support local organization, and vote, speak up. And this moves us from sustainability to regeneration. Not merely how little damage can I do, but how can I contribute and what can I contribute with? All right, number 5, last one of my tips on how to approach this sustainability in a more maybe inner way. We want to build relationships, relationship with the nature, with the place, with people, with the local economy. So once sustainability becomes relational, It stops being an abstract moral problem. If you know the farmer who grows your food, if you know the tree outside your house and you see it growing every day, if you know the beekeeper that made your honey, if you know your neighbor, if you know the river, you see it flow every day through all seasons, and if you know where your money goes, then you begin to care differently. You build this relationship. Sustainability isn't only about reducing our impact, it is also about belonging, reminding that we are part of that same system. Let's move on. What if this enoughness isn't the question? Let us go one step deeper. If I keep asking myself, am I doing enough? My thoughts, my own thoughts, race immediately towards everything I could be doing more of. And honestly, that is anxiety coming right at me. So maybe we can shift the question. So, what am I ready to notice? What am I ready to learn and change? Where do I have influence? We all have different areas of expertise. So, where can we affect and who can I do it with? So, like the inner development goals, being, thinking, relating, collaborating, acting. Sometimes change begins with the moment we finally allow ourselves to see something differently. And that's okay. It is safe. So, as I hope I was able to communicate, I don't see sustainability as something separate from my yoga practice. I realized over the past weeks being in Italy that I have tried so hard to explain what I do, find and clarify the connection between yoga, sustainability, beekeeping, and the natural product. And I think I've been doing it too much. And you know why? Because I think that some things where I come from are so obvious, they're unspoken, they are understood. While in Sweden, there needs more explanation, more labeling, more framing, more putting out exactly how it is. So there is not that unspoken. That I get it. Yeah, of course, all these areas are interconnected. Anyway, that was a little parenthesis. So sustainability, yoga practice, they are strictly interconnected. Sustainability is both an outer practice and an inner practice. Yoga asked me to notice, to question, to stay present with something that is uncomfortable, to consider the consequences of my actions and take responsibility for them, to practice kindness and compassion, to examine what is enough, to recognize that I am part of something larger than myself. And then, important, to get off the mat and do my best to live accordingly. So the mat is not the accomplishment. Remember, it is where we practice becoming the people we want to be in the world, training the nervous system to make choices that feel safe even outside of the mat of the yoga studio. But of course, we need a better system, better policies, better technology, better infrastructure, or newer. But we also need humans who can tolerate complexity, who can think beyond themselves, so take responsibility, collaborate, care, adapt, speak up, and act. So perhaps sustainability begins with something very simple, which is to notice. And I know that it is not easy to notice where we are staring at our phones, when we walk around and we have headphones. We don't see, we don't hear. We are constantly distracted. So how can we go back into, remove those earplugs? Actually look around yourself when you're sitting on the train or on the bus or you're walking to where you have to go. Notice what is around you. Notice what you consume. Sometimes we eat and look at our phones, and what do we notice? Very little. Notice what you have become numb to. Notice also where you have influence, and then learn, choose, connect, and act, and repeat. Our individual actions are not enough, but they definitely matter. They have an impact. And so with this, I hope that I could give you a different entry point in this sustainability that sometimes is so broad, so overwhelming. And instead, maybe you can take a few bits and pieces from inner practices, from how we can be humans who can deal with it. If you have watched the movie Don't Look Up, instead, let us be able to look up and know what to do, know how to act without feeling paralyzed, and slowly learning to deal with today's challenges that are indeed huge. We don't know if we will succeed, all right? But we can learn to deal with that anxiety. We can learn to deal with that not knowing, but still caring for our planet, still caring for our surroundings. That is our piece of the planet. And remembering that the air we breathe is everybody's air. We're all connected. And what I do in one place is connected to everywhere on planet Earth. So that's a wrap for today's episode of the Synergy podcast. I hope this conversation sparked something within you. This was a tough one to create. I would love to hear your feedback. I would love to hear your reflection. I hope to see you on Instagram, and until next time, move with ease and live with joy.